Welcome to Inspired Living with Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. Every Wednesday, Marc, along with his special guests, will explore thought-provoking topics and ideas that promote creativity, self-help, healing, happiness, and well-being to inspire you on your spiritual journey. Each week, Marc will discuss different paths to achieving a more spiritual, balanced, happy, and healthy lifestyle. Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual. Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. Marc is a tested, certified, and professional spiritual medium, metaphysical teacher, healer, and spiritual advisor with a spiritual practice based in Seattle, Washington. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be in this beautiful, healing, transformative, awakening planet of ours. This is Inspired Living Radio. I am your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. Happy to be sitting, having a cup of coffee or a cup of tea with you today. It's going to be a episode dedicated to a spiritual leader, a spiritual icon. We actually had a guest scheduled for today, and as we all know, life can make changes, and life can cause us to be like bamboo and become flexible for change. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about without our guest, we'll have our guest on here next month in February, which is going to be an exciting show. Got a couple guests coming up that I'm looking forward to. I figured that I would dedicate this show, this podcast, my time to the teachings and the philosophy and the wisdom and the knowledge of Thich Nhat Hanh, who some of you may know. Some of you may be hearing that name for the first time. And we're going to take this next 45 minutes of Inspired Living to reflect, to rejuvenate, to acknowledge, and to honor his passing into spirit as he moved into spirit just a few days ago, and talk about his philosophies and what he brings to our world, starting all the way back in 1966, and we'll give a little bit of history on his work, who he was, what he teaches. I know for my journey, I read his book, Be in Peace, years ago when I was in a very dark, lost way, grieving heavily with a lot of things that had come my way in life, or what I call today the traumas and the tragedies, or the TNT that blew my life up. And when he passed, it was sad. It was, I think his health had been going for a few years downhill, and now he's on the other side. But I know that his teachings and his philosophy and his words will live on long after. And I guess that's part of the doing this work, right? Is knowing that you plant the seeds and you plant the tree, but you don't always get to see it grow to its full potential, and the people that will come and sit under it later in life. And a lot of what we do here on Inspired Living Radio and the work that I do is for that same reason. Not that I'm not comparing myself in any way to Thich Nhat Hanh. I just know that I want to bring and leave a legacy of inspiration and information of teachers and inspirers and educators and healers and life coaches that are making a difference in our world. So sit back, relax, join us for 45 to 50 minutes of what I call spiritual awesomeness. If you're new to our show, thank you so much for tuning in to our live show, which can be listened to on the global player over at OMTimes Radio. That's internet radio. Just go to OMTimes. You'll see a global player up in the right-hand corner. You click on that, and that will actually start streaming. It doesn't matter where you're at in the world. As long as you have any streaming device, you can get the live show right now on Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And then if you don't catch the live show, you can always catch the replays over on OMTimes in the archives. You can also catch replays at marclainhart.com. And now Inspired Living is streaming through all of your favorite podcasting platforms. So whatever, podcasting platforms you use, iTunes or Spotify or YouTube, whatever that may be, just look for Inspired Living and check out the last 7 seasons of shows that we've done covering all aspects. You name it, we've probably covered it. So I'd love to have you leave us a review and keep having us move up the list of favorite inspiring podcasts out there. We've moved up from 25 to number 24, and we are now FeedSpot's part of FeedSpot's best 70 inspirational podcasts to listen to in 2022, and we're number 24 on that list. So it's always fun. You can also catch us over on our social media pages, which is Facebook, the main Facebook page of inspired listeners from around the globe. Just look for Inspired Living Radio and Podcasts, and you'll see a picture and be able to join the public group. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram under the handle @InspiredForUs. That's the number 4, Inspired For Us. And you can also find me if you want to learn more about the work I'm doing here in Seattle, Washington. Whether it's a meditation, whether it's a Facebook live show, a TikTok, whatever, this radio show, just go to marclainhart.com or internet search the Intuitive Prospector to get to all those different links. Or as I like to say, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover that diamond within. So we're going to take the next few minutes talking about a spiritual icon, somebody that I wasn't really aware of years ago, almost 20 years ago. I was not aware of Thich Nhat Hanh. And I picked up his first book, for me, was Be in Peace. Now, he's written several books. He's got, a list, top 10 list, if you will. But for me, it was Be in Peace and where I was at in my journey. And I just want to read a little bit about who he was and what he brought to the world. So Thich Nhat Hanh was a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, a poet, a scholar, very much a peace activist. He was a Buddhist monk who sought to apply the principles of not only his faith to the problems of the world, and he developed a worldwide following through his teachings and writings while he was living in exile from his native country of Vietnam for decades. And then I found this interesting because I'm a numerologist, so I'm always looking at numbers. Numerologist is what I always say is the cousin to astrology. Astrology is based on planets and how the planets connect to us, where numerology is connecting based on the vibration of numbers and the connection to life. That's kind of how I relate the two. And we've had past shows on numerology, on astrology, but his passing on January 22nd, 2022 was interesting because we're in a master number year of the 2022, which is called the Master Builder. It's a year of hope. I did a podcast on this a couple weeks ago, just kind of my forecast and predictions for what I see coming up for this year. So it was interesting that he passed on a master number of 22, which also represents double peace and also represents master building. Literally, we've torn stuff down. If you think of a master builder, they come in and they develop the land, they lay a foundation, they build the house, and people move into that house and live their lives. That's what he's done over the course of his work. And he was 95 when he passed. So he passed on January 22nd, 2022. It'd be interesting I don't have a time of when he passed, but it would be interesting to see if there's any twos associated with the time that he passed, because it's, numbers speak to us. Numbers are a way of the universe having a voice without actually having a vibration off a vocal cord. And his lifelong efforts to generate peace and reconciliation, it was so powerful back in even 1966 from Vietnam, before he was exiled, or maybe it was right after. I know that Martin Luther King Jr. Nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize in 1967, and we celebrate this as a federal holiday now, which wasn't always the case just a few years ago. We now celebrate in January Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So it'd be interesting as the years progress what kind of honors that Thich Nhat Hanh will receive for the work that he did. It can be a tongue twister. But what was interesting is, Martin Luther King Jr. at the time saw his work and his vision and his energy and his mannerisms and nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize in 1967. He founded the Hanh Buddhist University in Saigon and the School for Use of Social Services in Vietnam. And when he wasn't traveling the world, he did a lot of traveling as I guess Buddhist monks may do. And he taught what's called the art of mindful living. He also, with the art of mindful living, and it really opened my journey that I'll touch on here in a few minutes about how I became aware of Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching. I was really had no mindful. There were a lot of anger, a lot of grief, a lot of uncertainties for my journey. And when I read his first book, Be in Peace, he talked about, and this is a quote from him: if in our daily life we can smile, if we can be peaceful and happy, not only we, but everyone will profit from it. This is the most basic kind of peace work. And when I read that, he was sharing his insights of interdependence, and it's your action and your state of being that affects everyone around you. If you're peaceful, your family, your friends, and the society will benefit from your peace. And I was in such an unpeaceful way in my late 20s. My brother had just been murdered, and I was angry and I was grieving. And 3 days later, my older brother was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. So in the span of a week, I was told that both my brothers, one had moved into the spirit world and one was about to cross over as well. And it brought a lot of confusion. It brought a lot of anger. It brought a lot of things that I couldn't control of. We think about the serenity prayer of this day and age, and Lord, grant me the patience for the things I cannot change, and the courage for the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I couldn't unring those bells that had been rung. And somebody had mentioned to me this Buddhist monk out of Vietnam, and I was like, oh, okay, Buddhism, not really sure, and kind of opening up to spiritualism and psychic sciences and healing and mediumship and metaphysics, and some would call it the woo-woo or the unseen. And I was actually at the University of Washington, of all places. I always tell people I went to take graduate studies to become a spiritualist and a psychic and a medium. People look at me and go, well, how'd that work out? How'd that become? And it was in this course of meditations for the professional athlete that one of my colleagues in the class, the professor was teaching on different aspects of meditation. And I told this story of what I was going through at the time to this colleague in my class. And he had said, well, read this book by Thich Nhat, and it's called Be in Peace. And I was like, well, okay, I'll give it, I'll be open to it. I'll start prospecting. And from those days is when the Intuitive Prospector and my spiritual practice in Seattle was actually born and was created. One of the first books that I read was Be in Peace, followed by The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari and The Four Agreements. And I think there was a couple other books, The Untethered Soul, The Alchemist. I mean, there was a lot of books that I was really just diving into because I was trying to find peace. And so we're dedicating this hour to Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, a spiritual leader, a spiritual icon, a poet, a scholar, a peace activist, and really brought forth the art of mindful living. Some would actually call him the father of mindfulness. A lot of people do. I know that mindfulness has been around for many, 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 many years, but we do look at him as the father of mindfulness. And he also started to present in 2012, before his health changed, he started to present what he called the 14 mindfulness trainings, and something I started to look at after reading his book. And I took the 14 mindfulness trainings, and it helped cultivate my concentration, my focus, my insight, which in the long run, at the time I didn't understand it, didn't really know it, but what it did was it gave me insight which freed me from fear and the illusion of a separate self and what he teaches. There's a great interview with him. Ram Dass interviewed him I couldn't tell you, a couple years ago, probably around that time, probably around 2012 during this interview. It's a fantastic interview. I always recommend people watch that. And he spent a lot of his time in the last part of his life traveling the world teaching on this art of mindful living. And he would do his writings in the gardens at Plum Village in France because he had been exiled. And it wasn't only until after he had a stroke in 2014 that Vietnam allowed him to come back. But during there, he was at a Buddhist monastery for monks and nuns and a mindfulness practice center for, just common lay people that didn't really, like myself, know about mindfulness. What is this mindfulness? And he always talked about mindfulness is an energy. And we got a break coming up, but when we come back from our break, we're going to talk about his 3 breaths and talk about breathing mindfully and, how to get clear of your anger. Or maybe, you're listening to this show today and you have a lot of uncertainty. You have a lot of anger. Maybe you've lost somebody from this pandemic. I know that there's, 5.6 people as of today that have moved in the spirit world from this pandemic and COVID-19. So maybe there's a lot of frustrations and anger and grieving energy around where you're currently at. And if you just so happen to come across this live show or the podcast, there's usually a reason for that. And we're going to talk about his 3 breaths. We're going to talk about breathing mindfully and how to clear some of those fears, those angers, that grieving energy, and the illusion of fear, which, I always say, if you follow my work, I always say fear is false evidence appearing real. Face everything and rise, and the illusion of a separate self. Because at the end of the day, we are all interconnected and symbiotic connected. So we're going to take our first break here, and we'll come back, and this is a show dedicated to the Vietnamese Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh. We'll be back here in 2 minutes on Inspired Living Radio.
The future of internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
Hello, listeners. We hope you're enjoying the shows here on OMTimes Radio. Marc Lainhart here, and host of Inspired Living Radio. And I'd like to invite you to my morning show of inspiration, encouragement, healing, motivations, transformations, and discovering that diamond within. Metaphysical Mocha Mondays, every Monday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, over on the Intuitive Prospector Facebook page and my YouTube channel, Soul Adventures. Dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover that diamond within.
COVID-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
Do you feel like your emotions are all over the place? That's normal during this abnormal time. There are a number of ways to cope. Maintain a healthy routine, get enough sleep, eat nutritious food, and exercise at least 30 minutes each day. Schedule some time to talk with a friend or family member. And remember, you can always take a few deep breaths to feel more centered.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
And welcome back to Inspired Living. I'm your host, Marc Lainhart. Today we are dedicating an episode of Inspired Living to just an amazing man, an amazing spiritual leader, and just remembering through his teachings and sharing that. And maybe this is the first time you've heard of Thich Nhat Hanh. I know that he is being remembered all around the world, and I know he had a big part of my own journey. He didn't know me personally. I didn't know him personally. It would have been awesome to maybe have a sit down with him. I know I was talking with Chris, my producer, before the show, and he actually was on the cover of OMTimes magazine, and Chris and his wife Liana got to have an interview with him, so I'm going to pick his brain because that's kind of 2 degrees of separation, as they say. But they say from Martin Luther King Jr. from MLK to the Silicon Valley, how the world fell for the father of mindfulness. And before the break, I was talking about what his teachings were, and we're going to talk about that in depth. And maybe you're just, with everything going on in our world, the uncertainties, the transformations, the awakening, this pandemic, maybe you're in a way that you need some guidance, and we find that we can get guidance from those ancestors that came before us, those spiritual leaders, those mindful leaders. You can go all the way back to Pythagoras. You can go back to Plato. You can go back to some of the greats in philosophy and mindfulness. And one of the quotes that I loved was when he talked about, when another person makes you suffer, it is because he suffers deeply within himself, and his suffering is spilling over. He does not need punishment. He needs help. That's the message he is sending, and that's from Thich Nhat Hanh. And when I read that, I started to realize how much anger I was having, and what that was spilling over into my relationships, my marriage, my family, my friends, my coworkers. I think back to those dark dark days where the trauma started to trigger the transformations and think, oh my gosh, how did people put up with me? I was probably such a bear, such a just a drip of negativity, because there was just, I didn't know which way to turn. And so what I started to do with his mindfulness trainings that had come in 2012, which was about the timing of everything, timing is always, divine, or timing is always a big part of this. Where I was at, it was years later or years before that the murder and the brain cancer and other events had taken place. My own near-death experience had taken place, that I really started to get into opening up to spiritualism and mindfulness and meditations and metaphysics. And in 2012, he had the 14 mindfulness trainings, and it's a course that I remember taking. And again, just that order of interbeing. So what he would talk about is just how we can get into breathing mindfully. And if you apply these techniques, if you start to train yourself just on the power of breath, you do realize that mindfulness is an energy of itself, and that the ego mind always has thoughts racing. If you look at the world today and why the world is so chaotic and our planet is suffering, it's because of us humans. And we've got billions of people running around the world with billions of thoughts, all going in different directions. And you don't see the rest of the world, the rest of the species that inhabit this beautiful planet of ours, doing that same thing. Now, some could argue that not all creatures are intelligent like humans, but there are creatures that are intelligent. Whales, dolphins, octopi have now been classified as sentient beings because they have the ability to feel pain and think. So we're learning more about our world and our universe. And just wait, guys. Like I said, guys and gals, we are going to open up the Roaring 20s. This decade is going to be quite a decade of change and transformation and awareness, from outer space to the depths of our ocean, to us as a species on this planet. And it's going to be a ride. And mindfulness is going to have a big part of that. But if you start to realize you don't have to believe everything that your mind is telling you, you realize that mindfulness really is its own energy. And you start to realize that you can think away, your grief or your anger. And you can do that by just taking what he called the 3-breath technique. And you just take 3 breaths in. So when you take that breath in, breathing in what you want and exhaling what you don't. So breathing in, I don't want anger. I release that anger. Breathing in, I don't want that anger anymore. Release that anger. Breathe in, I don't want that anger anymore. Release that anger. You can apply it to wherever you're at on your journey. Anger, grief, doubt, pain. Maybe you're in a part of your life where you're literally going through a painful trial. And I always say trial because everything is an awakening moment. Everything is a learning moment, and you want to heal. So you can actually start applying your own breath, your own healing prana and breath work to breathe in peace, breathe in healing, exhale injury, exhale fear, exhale whatever that may be. And if you just take a second and just do that exercise that we just did, the 3-breath technique, breathing mindfully that Thich Nhat Hanh taught on, it really does calm the mind. And I found this, when I was, like I said, taking my graduate studies at university, and I read this book and I started to do these 14 mindfulness trainings in 2012. And I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. It was literally an eureka moment. It was a light bulb moment. It was an aha moment, if you will, to be like, wow, there really is a difference between your thoughts and what you think your thoughts mean, or what you think your thoughts are real. And it was just in a moment for me. And that moment was delivered to my doorstep by that book, Being Peace, and the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh. And it was powerful. And I am grateful because it helped me with the work I do today. I am grateful because it helps me to help others, to inspire, to be here on this podcast doing Inspired Living Radio. That journey would probably have done differently if I wouldn't have had the traumas and the tragedy that triggered the transformation. And I'm very, very grateful for this guidance and his teachings and his awareness to mindfulness. So let's get in a little bit of more depth of, like I said, maybe you're hearing about him for the very first time. For those inspired listeners out there that have followed the show, we've talked about him in the past. We've talked about his teachings, but I wanted just to dedicate this hour and this airtime to him and his philosophies and his teachings, because you never know what that ripple effect, how far it goes, how broad it goes, how long it goes, that it whether it's this podcast or his teachings that fall on those ears and they start to prospect for their own spiritual diamond within, it can bring a lot of change and transformations. And we always talk about wanting to change the world, but we change it by changing ourselves. And that is what resonates out with. So he talked about in his doctrines and his theories and his ideologies, even Buddhist ones, he talked about openness and aware of the suffering created by, intolerance, fanaticism, materialism, and we can be bound to any doctrine or theory or religion or ideology, but he was committed to seeing the Buddhist teachings as a guide, meaning to help us learn to look deeply and develop understanding and compassion. There are many doctrines out there. There are many guides out there on, manuals, how to fight, how to kill, how to die for something. But, when we understand the fanaticism in so many different forms, it really is the result of perceiving things in what we call the dualistic or discriminative manner. And we can talk about duality. We can talk about non-duality. I try to keep it to duality because it's the angel on one shoulder, the devil on the other shoulder. It's the yin and yang. It's the dark and the light. It's the good and the bad, the good and the evil, however you want to look at that. And really becoming aware of how to train ourselves to look at everything with openness and insight of interbeing in order to transform the dogmas that are around us, the fears and the violence that it surrounds us in our world. And, to say that the world is a peaceful, nonviolent place would be a fallacy. It would be a straight up lie. You can go out and where your focus is, it determines your reality. But he also taught that for openness, you can also, start to look past that. You can start to, see the trees through the forest, if you will. You can start to see people for who they are. Maybe somebody is being, a jerk or being just, rude. And we see that a lot today with through the social medias, through, people just behaving in a poor manner because there's a lot of unhappiness out there. And I always say one of the things that is most tough to do, and I've learned this especially the last few years, is being able to smile in the face of somebody that's bullying you or spitting in your face, and not necessarily wanting to react to such low, ignorant, vibrational energy, and take that openness and be like, okay, let me just see myself in this world and how I would respond. The old me, would have gone right to, action, reaction kind of format. So he talks about openness. He talks about non-attachment to views. And what he talked about there was aware of the suffering created by the attachment to views and wrong perceptions. And one of the things that I've learned over doing this show for 7 years, doing my work, is the art of spirituality is your ability to shift your perspective. Those that think they're right about everything have a lot to learn. People that say, I know pretty much everything, usually know nothing at all from what I've come to learn. I need to put myself in that arena of, my young, arrogant, confident days of when I was in the Coast Guard. But we are determined to avoid being narrow-minded and bound to present views. We are committed to learning and practicing non-attachment from views and being open to others' insights and experiences in order to benefit from that collective wisdom. Today we see it, if you don't believe what I believe, you're wrong. We don't have this table of respect and civility to come together, which I have predicted the great coming together in our roaring 20s. I'm not sure what that trigger or catalyst will be to bring people together, but I do see this great coming together where we do come back to the table. We do see each other's viewpoints with respect and civility, and we start to practice collective wisdom for hopefully the benefit and the progress and the future of our species, because without that, Mother Earth will go on. She is the landlord, and she can evict at any time. And I think people, don't realize that. Insight is revealed through the practice of compassionate listening, looking deep, letting go of, notions or your expectations, whatever that is for you. And we are aware that the knowledge we presently possess is non-changeless, absolute truth. And truth is found in life. That's what he taught on, non-attachment to views. And we will observe life within and around us in every moment, ready to learn throughout our lives. Life is an acronym. Learn it from experience. I have come to learn. I don't always agree with what I learn, but there are life lessons. There are growing pains. The lesson repeats until it completes. What we resist persists. I found this to be true. And a big part of our journey is to learn it from experience, and to perceive and receive a deeper understanding based on kindness, compassion. Every show I do, whether you've been listening to this podcast and live radio show for years, or you just new, or you follow my Facebook show, Metaphysical Mocha Mondays, on my Facebook Live every Monday morning, I always try to finish my shows with be kind. Well, actually, I say until our next soul adventure together, because we're all having different soul adventures. And we were a soul first before we came to this arena of the physical world, which we call Earth and the human experience. But we were an energy soul first, and so shall we return. So until our next soul adventure together, be kind, be caring, be compassionate. And that's how I like to finish off my shows and the work that I do, because it's just a reminder to me. Because there are times I'm human. There are times I don't want to be kind. I don't want to be compassionate. If somebody does me wrong, or somebody says something about me on social media, the ego wants to protect, and the attachment, my view to that attachment, wants to respond, and it's not as easy as it sounds. It takes practice. It takes understanding. It takes discipline and desire, and the things that he talked about, to get away from those non-attachment to views. And it also, by doing this with his 14 mindfulness trainings that he established in 2012, what it does is it allows you a freedom of thought. And when you become aware of the suffering pretty much brought about when we impose our views on others, or others impose their view on us, we are determined not to force others, even our children, by any means whatsoever, such as authority, threat, money, propaganda, indoctrination, to adopt our views. For example, I was raised in Catholicism, and, I don't practice Catholicism. I was raised in it. It was pretty much spoon-fed to me, and I had to do it for my younger years growing up. And no disrespect to the Catholic Church, not at all. There's, the Catholic Church has done a lot of good around the world, just as many religions have done. But as I got older and I became a spiritualist, I didn't really agree with the doctrines and the dogmas and the guidance of that certain religion. Now, that religion was put on me based on my parents' learned behavior, passed down, and where I'm at in the world. So you always got to look at, how you're raised, where you're at in the world. Because if I was born in Vietnam, or if I was born in China or a different part of the world, I may be Hindu, I may be Krishna, I may be Buddha. I mean, it just really depends. Maybe Jewish. It would just depend on where I was born, and that's another. For me, that's, we come into certain parts of time, certain parts of the planet, because it's about learning, and it's about that freedom of thought and understanding that, we are committed to respecting the rights of others, to be different, to choose what we believe and how to decide. And we, through his teachings, we will, however, learn to help others let go and transform narrowness through loving speech and compassionate dialogue. That's what freedom of thought is. That's what this show represents. I found that people don't usually agree with what I say, and that's okay, but they lose the lack of civility, and they attack and they demean. And I always tell people, if I'm wrong, please educate me. There's a lot of things I don't know, but don't demean me. And that's a great way to de-escalate. Maybe you're having a disagreement with a family or a friend based off of this pandemic, vaccinations, not vaccinations, wearing a mask, not wearing a mask. We see the politics divide here in the United States, which is only going to continue to progress, unfortunately. But what you can do is, to bring something down and not be that attachment to the views that he taught on was, educate me. Don't demean me, because all that does is just create, an energy and a barrier. And a lot of times when I say that to people, they can share their perspective and then allow me to share my perspective. And then sometimes we can meet in the middle, and sometimes we just end up with, we can agree to disagree. And that's freedom of thought. That's not being attached to your views, because there are people that are going to not change based on their views at all. So if you want to call in, I will open the phone lines. Just if you have an experience, if you've been inspired by either this podcast or the teachings and the philosophies of the this great Buddhist, Thich Nhat Hanh, you can call in to 202-570-7057 if you want to just share something based on today's show, based on today's topic. We are dedicating Inspired Living Radio to this amazing man, this amazing teacher, and we're just talking about his 14 mindfulness trainings and what he did for the art of mindful living as the father of mindfulness. So if you do want to call in, Chris, my producer, will put you in the waiting room. Again, that number is 202-570-7057. That is the OMTimes radio call-in line, and we will have a conversation with the amount of time that we have left. But today we are honoring and remembering the spiritual leader Thich Nhat Hanh, where he says to be beautiful means to be yourself. You don't need to be accepted by others. You need to accept yourself. So we're going to take our final break here. We'll be back here in 2 minutes. This is Inspired Living Radio. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
The cutting edge of conscious radio. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Have you wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
One planet, 7.3 billion people, only one you. Life offers us many opportunities and learning experiences. Are you ready to explore and discover this beautiful planet, the life and energy all around us, the spiritual world, and what is unseen, along with your own personal soul adventure? Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, is the spiritual connection you have been prospecting for. Internationally known as a tested and professional clairvoyant medium and spiritual advisor, Marc's work as a metaphysical teacher, medical instructor, radio show host, inspirational writer, and hiking guide are here to help you on a journey of self-discovery, healing, inspiration, education, and a whole lot of spiritual awesomeness. Dare to dream. Dare to explore. Dare to live. For more information on Marc's spiritual practice in Seattle, Washington, please visit marclainhart.com or internet search The Intuitive Prospector.
If I could be you.
And you could be me?
For just 1 hour.
If you could find a way.
To get inside.
Each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
great advertisement right there that ties perfectly into what we're talking about today. Mindfulness, walk a mile in my shoe, and how we can make changes to our world. Today we are honoring the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a poet, a scholar, a peace activist, a teacher. And I was just, before the show, I was looking at some of the tributes to him and some of the accolades and the remembrance for him as he lays in state in Vietnam. And before he got sick, he had urged his followers not to put his ashes in a vase and lock him inside, or quote what he'd say, limit who I am, end quote. Instead, the Zen Buddhist monk, poet, and peace activist told them, if I'm anywhere, quote, if I am anywhere, it is in your mindful breathing and in your peaceful steps, end quote. So that was fun to read, and then to even hear, the Dalai Lama speak about him, the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism, that he really did live a truly meaningful life, and he has no doubt that the best way we can pay tribute to him is to continue his work to promote peace in the world. And that's why I'm dedicating this show to him, to this energy and this vibration and this ripple effect to promote peace in our world. Because right now, with everything going on the world scale, there is a lot of uncertainty and worry and fear. And, we can always be, as light workers, as light warriors, we have a duty to stand in the light and to promote positivity and to promote, perspective and information that helps inspire people, helps motivate people, encourage people, empowerment of people. And, one of the quotes that has stuck with me about suffering, because I was suffering for many years. It's only recently, after about 20 years and through, counseling, that I was able to let go of survivor's guilt. Because, for those of you that have lost a close personal family member, or, a partner, or your spouse, there is a real thing called survivor's guilt that I really wasn't aware of, and, didn't understand that had come for years after both my brothers passed into spirit. And I was suffering my past, and I was, suffering with survivor's guilt because, my brother had, one of my brothers had 4 children, and he should have stayed and raised them. And I should have, I don't have any children, so I should have moved into the spirit world. But that's not the cards that, are dealt and the cards that are played. But Thich Nhat Hanh talked about people have a hard time letting go of their suffering. Out of a fear of the unknown, they prefer suffering that is familiar. And when I read that, I was like, oh, wow, another mind-blowing, you're right. I am, preferring to stay in something that is familiar for many years, of that suffering, pain, and grief, and anger. And, if anybody's ever had a family member murdered and you've ever gone to a psychologist or a counselor, they'll tell you your stress level is pegged automatically at 100%. Then you add the other things of life onto it, and it can be quite suffering. And you become familiar with it, and so you stay there and you marinate in that. Thich Nhat Hanh reminded us that we can separate from that. And it's that fear, that false evidence appearing real of the unknown. A lot of it's unknown. Today is unknown. There's that saying, yesterday is history, tomorrow's a mystery, today is a gift. That is why we call it the present. And when I started reading his book, the other book that really comes to my mind, and I'll get back to some of his teachings, is The Miracle of Mindfulness that he wrote a couple years ago. And it was really, he quoted about talking, like I said earlier in the episode, about breath as a tool. And if you start to look at that as a way for your journey, like we use tools to create and to build things, if you look at your breath being a tool, breath itself is mindfulness. You start to build and heal and transform based on the power of just breath and realizing that is a tool. It was originally written, the Miracle of Mindfulness, I believe it was originally written in Vietnamese, and then it was translated. But it was really just a long letter that he had wrote to encourage his friends and his followers and his colleagues during a crisis. It was really a personal and direct letter to, practice the art of mindfulness meditation. And I founded the book to contain, memorable exercises and practical exercises that would help me be mindful in different situations, difficult situations, traumatic situations. And if you're new to mindfulness, like I was back in 2011, 2012, when I started to prospect for all these different things, it did help me to learn as a tool to calm down in my daily life and not let my mind, my ego get the best of me. And I would recommend this book. I'd recommend all his books. He was just an amazing man. And, I was very sad to find his passing on the 22nd, but at the same time, I know that his health for years, he had a stroke in 2014 and his health had been waning. And I always remind people that your health is your greatest wealth. It doesn't matter how rich you are. I always go back to Steve Jobs. He was, a rich man, for Apple, but, he couldn't escape the cancer that took him at such a young age. And we're all, terminal. We're all heading, every day. At the end of the day, we're another day older. So it really is that unknown, but your health really is your true wealth, because you don't get to take any of this that you've accumulated here with you. So as the old saying goes, you came in naked, so shall you return. But it did help me to understand through his teachings, through his philosophy, through his wisdom of how to calm down in my daily life. And, there's instructions on how to meditate that are short, simple enough for anybody to follow. Myself, I always say, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And you don't need anything else to practice the teaching except your breath. And that's like we did earlier, that 3-breath technique, breathing in 3 breaths. You can do a 10 breath. You could do a box breath. There's many different, there's Wim Hof breath. There's Soma breathing. I've worked with the different powers of breath, which has helped heal and transform and has been quite an amazing journey. So today we are dedicating this episode to a wonderful spiritual teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away on January 22nd at the age of 95, and just continuing with his teachings. Like I said, if you want to call in, great. If not, no worries. We'll have other shows where you can call in and have discussions and philosophy, and that number to always call for OMTimes is 1-202-570-7057. That is the main call-in line for OMTimes Radio. You can also follow the show on our growing Facebook page. It's now called Inspired Living Radio and Podcasts, where we have listeners from all around the planet. And we always like to say, be inspired, inspire others, inspire before we expire. You can also follow us at Instagram and Twitter under the handle Inspired For Us. That is the number 4, Inspired For Us. And if you want to work with me or learn about the work I'm doing here in the Pacific Northwest, you can go to marklainhart.com or internet search the Intuitive Prospector. And you can also find me here on Wednesdays for Inspired Living. So with that, let's pick up, because this show goes by so quick. Let's continue to just talk about his teachings. So we talked about his openness. We talked about non-attachment to views. We talked about freedom of thought. We talked just right now, we're talking about awareness of our suffering, and that when we look deeply at our own suffering, it can help us cultivate understanding and compassion, where we're determined to come home to ourselves, to recognize, accept, embrace, and listen to our own suffering with that energy of mindfulness, and use the power of breath as a tool to become aware of your mindfulness. We will do our best not to run away from our own suffering or cover it up through, consumption, but practice conscious breathing and walking to look deeply into the roots of our suffering. That path will become illuminated. And it's a path that leads to, like I said, transformation, healing, awakening, whatever that is for you, wherever you're at on your journey. But a lot of times we get comfortable with that suffering, and a lot of us suffer our past knowing that we can never change it, and we always project to the future that's never guaranteed. So once we have an understanding of our own suffering, we're able to understand the suffering of others. And there's that kindness, compassion, caring. Many teachings that many great leaders from Buddha to Christ to Krishna to Muhammad have taught about the suffering and the deep suffering that they went through, because it's from that, if you understand the suffering of others, then you will start to understand your journey, your role. And if we're committing to finding ways, including personal contact, I think of Mother Teresa in the streets of Calcutta, personal contact. And we have so many means to this day: telephone, email, audio, visual, electronic. We become more connected in our history than any point over time based on our technology. But at any point in time, we're more disconnected than we ever have been. That's a little disturbing. That's a little concerning to me. And, that personal contact, myself included, I do these shows. It's a reminder because I'm hearing myself say it. Those thoughts become my words become my action about my own journey. And how can I reach out? How can I help people that are suffering? And I hope that this show, this platform, and the work I do does help in some small way. He talks about compassionate, healthy living. He talks about aware that happiness is rooted in peace, freedom, compassion, solidarity. We are determined not to accumulate wealth while millions are going hungry and dying, nor to take as the aim of our life fame, profit, wealth, sensual pleasure, which can bring much suffering and despair. And we've done past shows here on Inspired Living where we've interviewed people. Some of the most happiest people in the world are people that don't have all that fame, that wealth, that social media presence. You see a lot of that now. How many likes can you get? How many followers can you get? And that's really, takes away from that compassionate, healthy living that Thich Nhat Hanh taught on and philosophized with his mindfulness trainings and, the art of mindful living. So I think I'll get to 7. I think what I'll do is I'll give you some podcast homework for you to go out and to prospect for, let's see, I covered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll do one more, 7, because 7 in numerology is such a spiritual number. It's about truth, finding truth. But I'm going to give you your homework to go out and to do your own prospecting, to do your own research on who Thich Nhat Hanh was, to look up mindful the art of mindful living, his 14 mindfulness trainings, what he taught on, and just see if it's something that you resonate with, that you're drawn to, and maybe it helps you. His last one, halfway through, is about taking care of anger and dwelling happily in the present moment. Anger blocks communication. It creates suffering. There's a lot of anger out there in our world. You can just open up social media or just listen to a news channel, and you'll see that there's a lot of anger. And are we committed to taking care of our energy, of our own anger when it arises, and recognizing and transforming the seeds of anger that lie deep in our consciousness? I know I was in that place until I became aware of it in my own anger and letting go through mindfulness practice and breath work of letting go of that. Dwelling happily in the present moment, aware that life is available only in the present moment. Eckhart Tolle teaches about that, the power of now. Awareness is the greatest agent for change. And if we're committed to training ourselves to live deeply each moment of daily life, we will try not to lose ourselves in being carried away by the regrets of the past, the worries about the future, or any cravings or anger, jealousy that can be in your present moment. And if you do that through mindful breath work and awareness, being in the now, I always talk about the magic in the moment, then you will start to see your life change in amazing, transformative, healing ways. So we're dedicating this episode to Thich Nhat Hanh. May he rest in peace and fully healthy on the other side. I'm sure he will continue. I have no doubt that he will continue to resonate long after his passing, where they'll look back in this point of his life, starting back in, the early 60s, in all the books that he has written. I think the book that I read, The Miracle of Mindfulness, was, I think, 1975. So that made me like 3 years old. So he will carry on. History will remember him, and may he rest in peace. And I hope that today's episode is at least a way that I can honor somebody I've never met, but somebody who inspired me, who helped me in ways that he didn't even know. And he talks about, in that Miracle of Mindfulness, an introduction to the practice of meditation, as we get ready to wrap up here, he talks about people usually consider walking on water or in thin air a miracle. But I think the real miracle is not to walk either on water or in thin air, but to walk on earth. Every day we are engaged in a miracle which we don't even recognize. A blue sky, white clouds, green leaves, the black, curious eyes of a child, our own two eyes. All is a miracle. And that is by Thich Nhat Hanh, The Miracle of Mindfulness, an Introduction to the Practice of Meditation. And he's right. We're on a big blue planet going around a big ball of fire in a universe that's mathematically incomprehensible. So get ready, everybody. The Roaring 20s are going to be a lot of fun with a lot of awakening, transformation, and of course, you know, the teachings and philosophy and the wisdom of an amazing man, Thich Nhat Hanh. So until our next soul adventure together, be kind, be caring, be compassionate. And no matter where you're at and what you're going through, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover that diamond within. Namaste.